Welcome, everyone. We'll be starting in a few minutes. If you just make sure your mics are muted, that would be great. I'm glad to see everyone. We're here tonight to learn about PLPs, personalized learning plans with the New Brunswick Disabilities Association. And I just want to welcome you. Some of you are new to us, and some of you are very familiar faces. Just want to tell you that the New Brunswick Adoption Foundation is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. And we at the NB Adoption Support Network, we're a program of them. And for those of you that are new to us, we do things like these webinars, we do support groups, we do social activities, we do one-on-one peer support, we meet with community professionals, child welfare professionals, and the overall mission of the foundation is to find homes, help promote, finding for permanent homes for kids who are in care. So I know a lot of you, some of you are waiting to be parents in the process somewhere. Some of you are all actively parents, and I know we have a few professionals. So it's nice to see such a broad group of people out here interested to learn about personalized learning plans tonight. And I am going to hand it over to the two people from the New Brunswick Learning Disabilities Association, Ainsley Congdon and Amy Wood. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us this evening.
You're most welcome. So I'm just going to put up one initial screen, and then we'll
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. Perfect. We'll make that bigger. So as Catherine said, I'm Ainsley Congdon and the Executive Director of the Learning Disabilities Association of New Brunswick. My background is education. I started my career as a teacher, middle school language arts from 5 to 8. And then life brought me to LDAMB, and I started as a project coordinator working with our tutoring program and series of events. I was able to become the executive director of the association, and joining me this evening is our board member, Amy Wood.
Hi, I'm Amy Wood, and I have a background in education as well. I've worked on ESST teams, or supporting ESST teams for the last educational support services teams, I should say, for the last 18 years. And I am currently on an endeavor I'm in it, I guess. I'm opening my, expanding my business, Open Mind Center of Learning. We are educational and behavioral consultants, and we are grounded in the principles of applied behavior analysis through a trauma-informed lens with our support. So compassionate care.
And so before we get started, I thought I would give you a bit of background on the services that LDNB provides to clients across New Brunswick. So our main thing right now that fills our plates is our Barton tutoring program. It is an intensive literacy program for students with dyslexia or other reading disabilities or difficulty with their reading. It's offered in person in our Fredericton region and online provincially. Our spring semester right now has about 125 students receiving tutoring from 27 tutors. We're hoping to expand our in-person offering in the fall as things lighten up with COVID, and community access to schools is really important to our service. One thing that's not mentioned there is we are piloting a French program that'll be suitable for French immersion students this summer. That will start in Fredericton, and then hopefully January 2023, we aim to have that as a small pilot in the Moncton region. We have an excellent partnership with elementary literacy to have Barton in Anglophone South region. We work collaboratively with other disability organizations, and NBDEN is one group, literacy organizations and government departments, so including EECD and PEDAL, so that's education and post-secondary. What we do for families is we provide tailored resources and support to adults, parents, and their children. So that means if you phone our office or you send us an email, we take the time to hear what you need and provide you with resources, support, anything that we can do to support you. And this includes our 3 Facebook groups. They're private groups. We have one for parents, one for educators, and one for adults. And that's supposed to be, it's a safe space for parents to ask questions of other parents or guardians who have been on that journey of figuring out what learning disabilities are, how to talk to the school, what is a PLP, what are accommodations, and just the opportunity to vent and share. And then one last thing that we have is we work with post-secondary, which is now Avenue NB, on management of psych ed assessments for adults. And we provide training on screening for success. So I'm going to put up the main presentation now. I don't mind questions. When I taught, I was interrupted all the time by students, so feel free to pop it into the chat. And Amy's going to be co-presenting with me and then moderating any questions that you have. So we're here to talk about, PLPs, what they are and what they do. So I like to refer parents back to policy and understanding what the rules are and how things can be governed. Amy, you good?
We can't see the PLP presentation.
Oh, shoot. Okay. 1 second. I'm sorry about that.
We're in tune with each other here. I was just about to message her that.
I saw you go off mute. Is that better, everybody?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks, Amy. So the inclusion policy, or policy 322, is the one that outlines inclusive education in New Brunswick. And just so you're aware, this policy has undergone a global review. I know that a report from the manager of the project, or the review, has been sent to the deputy minister. And so we're just waiting to see what those changes, what the recommendations are going to be and how they're going to be implemented in the policy. So they're not getting rid of 322, they're just updating it. So it was written in 2013 and things have changed since. Our kids are different. There are different needs. The world is different. So of course, policy should change to reflect the students that we serve. So it establishes the requirements to ensure New Brunswick public schools are inclusive, and that means for everybody. And I always tell parents it's important to know what is in the policy because it tells people what they're supposed to do. It outlines the terms and definitions, roles and responsibilities for the principal, the classroom teacher, the resource team or the ESS team, and what your role is as a parent and guardian. So what is a PLP?
So a personalized learning plan is a plan for a student who requires specific and individual identification of practical strategies, goals, and outcomes, targets, and educational supports that ensure the student experiences success in learning that is meaningful and appropriate to them, and it considers the student's individualized or personalized needs. Students can be on a PLP for a short term. So an example of that would be that they may have an illness and they can be on it for the whole duration of their schooling. There does need to be a purpose for a student to be on a PLP.
So just some key things to kind of highlight from certain sections of the PLP. These are the conditions that are required for a student to be on a PLP. So from the lens of a student with learning disabilities, specifically, strategies beyond robust instruction are required. So that would mean that they might be spending extra time with their teacher, either the specialist if they're in high school or their classroom teacher if they're in elementary school, and the extra help and support are just not helping them meet grade level requirements. So they're not being successful. So that's beyond robust instruction. If there are behavioral supports that are required, so outlined in section 6.6 of policy 703, which is the positive learning environment. So if they need a behavior plan, they also have to have a PLP as well. And then if the common learning environment is to be varied, so another reason that they might need a PLP.
So ESS, I mentioned this earlier. Educational Support Services Team is what ESS stands for, and these are school-based. There are district-based ESS teams as well that help support and manage the school-based teams. So this is a team led by the school principal that assists classroom teachers to develop and implement instructional and
Girlfriend, how are you doing?
and/or management strategies, and to coordinate support resources for students with diverse needs. In addition to school administrators, the team is made up of educational support service or educational support teachers. So those are ESTs, and other staff members whose primary role is to strengthen the school's capacity to ensure the student is learning. So it's when a PLP is being developed, or if your child is having any difficulty in school, it's really important that these people be at the table. They are the advocates for your child at school, not that, you know, the teacher and everybody is not, but the resource teacher plays an instrumental role in PLPs and developing them and ensuring they're being followed through. A really cool fact here is that depending on your child's abilities, they can be at the table as well for all of a meeting or parts of it, and it's really important to have them there if they're able to and willing to, so they can be advocates for their own learning, and they are the expert on themselves, right? So yeah. We've had many around grade 4 or 5. We that's about the age when we have them start to come in and be a part of the meetings.
And especially in the experience of the kids that we see that come into our tutoring program, how impactful it would be for them to have a voice in their learning. You know, because they can say, well, I like it best when I get to sit at the front of the classroom, or I like it best when someone reads a question to me, or I don't like it when I have to ask for my paper notes every time because I'm embarrassed. So it gives the children a voice. Plus, they're going to become adults at some point, and what great advocacy skills they will have developed for themselves at a young age. So there's positives, I feel, for them to be at the table. So the role of the principal in the team structure is to ensure that the PLP is being developed by the team, and that everyone is involved in that, that the student can be involved. If there's an EA involved, they're there. And then support from community organizations as well. So I know that NBACL, for example, is often very involved in meetings with their clients and their students. I've gone to one meeting, and so it's something that I hope that I can continue to do. A PLP is developed and based on the strengths of the student, their learning preferences and their needs, while considering the curriculum as well. And it also contains personalized goals and identify the specific teaching strategies and methods of evaluation. So that's really important if, for example, the student is on an adjusted, or what they used to call a modified PLP. It's important that that is all clearly outlined in the document. And that's the principal's job to do that. They also must ensure that the instructional hours are being met for their grade level. So especially if they're not using common learning environment and the student is outside of the classroom for a period of time, they have to be meeting their hours. If there's transportation involved because the student is on partial day, that's also in there. One that's really important is access to technological supports are supposed to be there, and to remove those barriers when it comes to assessments. So it is very difficult for students with I'm air quoting here, people with just learning disabilities to have access to technology. They're often placed last on the priority list. When a student who knows how to use their device and use it as a tool can be very independent in the classroom. So I've had district staff from a district tell me that kids with LDs are not a priority. So that made me very angry, and the department now knows that that was said. So they spoke to the wrong person.
Oh, it hurts
Um,
my heart. I've been at those tables around those
Yeah.
discussions, and it's really key to another important thing here though is if your child does have assistive technology, they're allowed to bring it home and even over the summer to use. So that's a good note to have. And there's just some paperwork that needs to be signed, but not even all resource teachers realize that, even though I've told them. But
they're supposed to.
yeah.
They're supposed to, yeah. And then in high school, that 2-year period before they're going to graduate, it's really important, that transition period for your high school students. And that PLP should have some transition strategies. For students with learning disabilities, the transition out of high school is rocky and rough, and they're not supported enough. I was fortunate this year to have a 1-year pilot, I'm hoping it'll become longer, with post-secondary, where they're providing psychoeducational assessments for grade 12 students who are in their last semester, who are going on to post-secondary and need an updated assessment. So that took, I think, the entire time I've been executive director for that to happen. Yeah. So right now it's 100 students, which I know is probably not enough, but it is a step. And so that means that those kids can access their grants and their student loans in a timely fashion. They're not going to be stressed in August because they don't have their money for their devices. It means that they can start their post-secondary and go to student services and have a plan and have the accommodations they need at post-secondary. So we're working on it.
And my son is going to be a recipient of those, one of those. So yeah, and he is going to do his apprenticeship. So it doesn't have to be that they're going right into a university or a college in the fall. Apprenticeships count as well. So that's new news to Ainsley. So she's
That's good. So the role of the classroom teacher. So these are the people who spend the most time with your child. And so they're integral when it comes to knowing the PLP. They should know what is in that document. And I know there's some questions around what to do or what's happening if it's not being followed. So we'll open the floor for questions about that in a few moments. So based on the PLP, they are to, use the curriculum to the extent of the greatest extent and what is appropriate for that student and the PLP. They're to develop it, implement it, and update it whenever is needed, and especially when there's significant changes required. So that would be if a student regresses and things need to be changed, or if they've met their goals and no longer need a certain accommodation, that's an appropriate time for things to be changed. They should be collaborating with parents and with the students and with other teachers and members of the EASS team and other professionals. So everyone should be on the same side as the student. Everyone should be circling that student to provide them with support. It shouldn't be parent and kid versus the school. I don't like it when that's the situation. I know it happens, but then people have the wrong mindset if people are seeing themselves as oppositional forces. So everyone should be circling that child. They're to review and update that PLP when the student transitions from a grade level or especially to a new school. So they're making that transition from elementary to middle and middle to high school, in consultation with parents. So if you have a middle school student, a grade 8er who is making that leap to high school, they will, and they're on a PLP, they will be part of that transition. So all the grade 9 teachers and the team get the grade 8 PLPs and they review them. And the same thing happens from elementary to middle school. It's a lot. I've been in a classroom, I think my last year, out of 29 grade 8s that I had in my class, 16 were on some sort of PLP. And I think there might have been 2 that were on individual plans. So it can be a lot for a classroom teacher, but there's ways around it and ways to support your students. And this is it. So I'm ahead of myself. So they need to ensure that lesson plans and instructional strategies reflect the requirements of the students. And that can be done with universal design for learning and teaching to everybody. They need to monitor and evaluate on an ongoing basis the effectiveness of their instruction. So if your student isn't getting something, it's not the student, it's you, the teacher. So there's something wrong with your instruction. And they need to make sure that it's appropriate and the students are meeting their goals and outcomes. They need to provide formal progress reports for the students with the PLP. So same documentation and their report card. And at the same time, this is done for all the other students. So they're treated the same when it comes to reporting.
So types of PLPs. So there's accommodated that's justified. So justified accommodations, this is a plan that provides strategies, supports, and technologies that help your child fully access the curriculum without changing the content or reducing the rate of learning. The plan is intended to remove barriers to learning and to help the learner master the same content as their peers. So some examples of justified accommodations are answers are written in test booklet, there's speech to text devices or assistive technology such as a laptop or a tablet or an iPad that they're using. They could have extended time, it has to be more than double. Word prediction software such as WordQ and math formulas presented so that they can support themselves through those challenging test times, because the world is, you know, it shouldn't be a test to them, and it should, yeah. Anyways, I'll stop. Go ahead.
And what's important is to know what is on their PLP, especially when they're in provincial testing or provincial assessment season. So if you have a grade 9 student who is going to write the ELPA, which is the English Language Arts Proficiency Assessment, they can have speech to text for that assessment, but they have to have it in their PLP. So it's really important to have a good look at that PLP at the end of grade 8 to make sure that that's what is there. They can't use text to speech in the elementary grades because they're testing reading comprehension. So having a story read to them would be a test of their oral comprehension, and are they hearing the story and can they tell it back? It's not testing their reading. So I realize that that seems really unfair for a kid with dyslexia, but if they change the reading curriculum, which they are, we won't know how it's working if we don't test their reading comprehension. So it doesn't affect their grade in grade 4, I think, when they write that their grade 4 assessment. So it's important to have those results just to know that, you know, the curriculum is working.
This one gets me a little heated because my son was on a justified accommodation. I had to advocate very hard for him, even though I was in the system. So I think I got a little choked up there. So, sorry. So again, adjusted curriculum. So this is what used to be known as modified curriculum. And over the past few years, they changed the name to adjusted. So this is a PLP plan that adjusts the grade level of the curriculum outcomes of a subject to address specific needs of the learner. The intent is to keep the integrity of the course, but to adjust the outcomes to help the learner work to their potential and meet with success. So an adjusted plan can be beneficial for students in early grades, especially to help close a gap. So like an example of a justified PLP, like in math class, say, most students have to do 10 questions for homework that night or finish 10 questions in class, and maybe someone on the justified PLP only has to do 6 or 3 questions, but it's the same content, whereas that was justified, whereas adjusted is maybe they're learning numbers up to 1,000 in grade 3, I think it's 1,000, and this child is learning their numbers up to maybe 200. So that would be the curriculum has been adjusted.
And so it's okay in an earlier grade to close that gap, but I would be mindful if your child is on an adjusted PLP in high school. You don't want them to exit high school on an adjusted PLP unless they absolutely need it.
Yeah.
And then that's fine. But if you have again, my air quotes, a child with just a learning disability, I would be very wary of them being on an adjusted PLP. It can have a negative impact on their access to post-secondary, especially community college where they have limited seating for students on an adjusted curriculum. They'd have to go special admissions. So just be very mindful of that. So I mean, for a child in grade 3 who needs to close 3 curriculum gaps, it's not going to have a huge impact, because then they can reach that goal. So what would you do if they were suggesting an adjusted PLP? So it depends on where they are and where they are with their learning. If they have targeted outcomes and a very clear plan of intervention to support that student, it's okay. 1 or 2 years, as I said, in elementary or middle school will not have an impact. And then be mindful of 11 and 12. A student on a PLP with justified accommodations can go to post-secondary. That's often a myth that I hear from parents, and they're like, the school told me they can't go to university if they're on a PLP, and that's wrong. They can have,
actually benefits them.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Right? That's okay. So they can have extra time at post-secondary. They can have access to technology. They can have support of the writing center or the learning center with accommodations. It's not going to have an impact. And so it makes me very angry when I have a parent that tells me, no, I don't want them on it because it's going to wreck their chances for university, when that's not the case. It's just giving them that leg up so that they can demonstrate what they know, using tools that they need.
Yeah, and universities and community colleges are outstanding at giving accommodations, better than any school in the public school system, I would say.
Yeah, so Mount A has the Meehan Center. My sister received excellent support from the Meehan Center when she did part of her undergrad there. The Student Services Center at UNB, I've heard, is great. STUs could use a little work, in my opinion. And NBCC is great. And the reception there is a bit varied with NBCC, but I've heard good things about their work with students on plans. So what is smart language? So especially if your child's on an adjusted PLP, so it's very specific, it's significant, it's measurable, and it's motivational for the student. So they're not going to feel overwhelmed if all of a sudden they can't do what the class is doing, but they can reach a specific goal and have success and do it right, and feel good about it. That's motivational. It's agreed upon. So with the parents, with the principal, with the teacher, and the goal is achievable for the student, and it's realistic, and it's trackable. So if I had one family that the student had, air quotes, just dyslexia, and they had that child on 21 adjusted curriculum outcomes. And I told the parent, do not sign that PLP. That is a leap that does not need to be made right now. See how she does with accommodations, extra time, spelling not counted on her work. But that 21 adjustments was completely wrong. You do not have to sign that PLP right away. When they send that home with you, be like, thank you, I'm going to take some time to absorb that. Compare it to their psych ed assessment if you have one, or any other documentation. Ask for another opinion. I'm going to be reviewing one this week from another parent, so I've done that before. So you don't have to sign it right away.
So moving on with types of PLPs. So there's individualized PLPs. These are personalized learning plans that are designed to target specific personalized goals that are not included in the prescribed curriculum. So it's like their own curriculum. So according to what their needs are and what their strengths are. So individualized behavior support plans. So this is designed to create an environment to assist the learner in developing pro-social skills positively and successfully. And this plan contains the support and interventions needed for the learner to reach their goals. And I'll add that their goals, under their goals are outcomes, and both the goals and the outcomes should be in that smart language that Ainsley just reviewed.
So just some key terms when you think about your accommodations that you might see. And we're going to look at some samples of PLPs coming up. So you'll see the accommodations broken down into the following categories. So presentation. So how are directions and content delivered to the student? Print size might be an adjustment. Number of questions per page. I don't know about anybody else, but if I had 50 math questions on one page, I would freak out. But if I had 10, I could be like, okay, I can do 10. So a lot of it is also mindset of the student. And again, they can do 10. Directions read aloud. Response. So how are the students demonstrating their knowledge and what they know? How are they showing what they know? So are they allowed to do a speech or a presentation instead of an essay? Are they still going to demonstrate that they know key knowledge and can answer the questions by doing a presentation instead of an essay? Yes. So why can't they do a presentation? Setting. So that's changes or alterations to the environment to help facilitate their learning. So that could be seat location, that could be quiet space or a little cubby at the back to work in. It could also be that the teacher wears an FM system so that their voice is amplified in the classroom and it can help drown out the noise. It might even be that they're allowed to wear noise canceling headphones in class. I know that made a difference for one student we work with because he could focus on his own work and he wasn't getting distracted by the buzz that was in the classroom. Timing and scheduling. So flexibility in the timing of an assessment. Think of a high school student with a learning disability who has one exam every day. That's a lot. They might need a day or two in between so that they can prep appropriately. Double time, extended time, breaks during an assessment are all key for students and for anybody really.
So justified accommodations are documented strategies, technologies, or adjustments without which the student would not be able to demonstrate their knowledge. These accommodations are documented within the PLP and require prior approval to be accessed during provincial assessments. And we kind of touched on a bunch of this, and we're going to look at some exemplars coming up.
Oh, sorry. Oh, wrong way. Universal accommodations are strategies, technologies, or adjustment that are available to any student, really. That will help them reach their prescribed outcome. And they do not necessarily have to be on a PLP. Although I might push for a parent to have any universal accommodation on the PLP because the teacher might forget. And then that way, if it's there, if it's in the PLP, it's documented, they're held account. They have to meet that.
That's a good point. These are legal documents. Mm-hmm. So when this is documented that that's what your child needs in order to be successful in school, the schools are held accountable. They're bound by the law. These are legal documents. So good point.
Yeah. And so a universal accommodation might be a quiet space to work. Any child would benefit from a quiet space to work. Having notes provided is a justified accommodation. But maybe, the student needs to sit at the front, but the teacher keeps forgetting that. That's a universal accommodation, but it could be a justified accommodation. So they tick boxes on the PLP form. And so it's important that you read through the document to make sure that everything is there. Universal design for learning is a set of principles for classroom instruction and curriculum development that benefit all students and give everybody equal opportunity to learn. It's UDL now, but when I was learning in my education degree, it was just best teaching practices. So if you're delivering your material or your particular lesson and it will reach your lowest student in your class and challenge your highest student in your class, you'll get everybody in the middle. And so it really is, it's just best teaching practice. So the way you might explain something, the way that you might design an assessment or an assignment, it'll meet everybody's needs. And then you could also customize things to meet individual needs as well. So this was my big question moment. Are there
Mhm.
any questions? Suzanne asked, so should the universal accommodations be definitely listed? They're not often, but I recommend that they would be, as Amy wrote in the chat. Yeah. It just holds the school to account. And I know what it's like to be in a classroom where you're overwhelmed and you forget. And I mean, I'm thankful I was not in the classroom this past 2 years, because I can only imagine what things have been like. But it's easy to forget things. And so if stuff is listed out and they're checking their documents regularly, things shouldn't be missed.
If things are being missed consistently, then you have that documentation to back up.
Exactly. Are there any questions? You're a quiet group. That's okay. So what if the school is not following the PLP? I don't have a slide for that, but I'll speak to it. So I get that question regularly. And so I like to approach it, my husband's military, so I like to approach things by following the chain of command. So you should be speaking and communicating with the classroom teacher, or with the specialist teacher if they're in high school. Then you know, if that doesn't work, then you take that up to the resource teacher or guidance if it's a behavior plan. If that doesn't work, well, then you loop in your principal or your admin. So either VP or principal, depends on who's assigned to the grade. Keep your communication always really clear and simple. Document your requests to the teacher. Find out what your child is saying might be true, but they're kids. So make sure you take the time to hear equally what the teacher has to say as well. And always go back to what's in the PLP and to the policies, because they have no leg to stand on if they're not following those things. And then it's a refresher for them as well. So I've dealt with a few parents who've had that experience, and usually a call to the vice principal or the principal is enough to kind of change things.
Oh, I'm typing in here, so I could just talk.
Yeah, go ahead.
Busy typing away here, sorry. So the question was, how soon, this was Erica, is there an age or grade where a behavior plan, including modified day plan, should it be? Oh, so I missed that. So how soon? I saw another one there too. So how soon? As soon as it's identified. A lot of people like to wait until, or teachers and schools, until they're in grade 2 or 3, but I don't think that they should wait. I think that it should be as soon as we're identifying that there's a need, and then that can help close the gap, as Ainsley had spoke of. And then behavior plans. I saw something about including modified day plan. So anytime a child is on a reduced day plan, there has to be a PLP. There has to, there's no excuses there, except for that the school isn't taking the time to write it. There has to be a plan on how they're going to get them back into school for the full day. And
another point with the PLP too is if they're only focused on the behavior, then they're not looking at the academic side of the student's needs either. And so assigned behavior plan between a teacher and a student, that's not appropriate. It should be the appropriate behavior plan with a PLP with academic goals. It should not just be, you're going to come to school and make it through your half day or whatever you're doing. They have to be doing education. Yeah.
And there should be replacement behaviors. It shouldn't just be focused on the behaviors that they want to reduce. There needs to be replacement behaviors to help build their skills. So I'm just reading here. Go ahead, Ainsley. I see you reading.
No, I think Erica, I want to talk to you. So I'll give you my contact information. The PLP includes 0 academics, and that's not
Thank you. I would love to talk to you more. I'm really, really upset about this.
Okay. My contact information is on the last slide, so I'll make sure you get that before we sign off. Okay. This way I can get all the background.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think, did we get everything else in the question? So my daughter is in grade 1. I was watching her development in kindergarten. Things were missing with her literacy skills. She is a young grade 1. Her birthday is in November, so she was 4 when she started school. So I know cognitively there's a lot of age difference between a just like 5-year-old and a kid who's turning 6 in January. So developmentally wise, yes, there's room. But I said to the school immediately, I'm watching her like a hawk. I think there's something going on, how are you going to support her? And so she is not on a PLP, but I was satisfied with what they told me that they're doing. So they are, her classroom teacher this year is following the new curriculum to the T. He is doing phonemic awareness with her. He's doing, all of the appropriate word work with her. And I'm happy with that. She's making gains, but she's not in a PLP. But that's because I trusted the teacher and the principal to do what they were going to say to do. If that was not the case, then I would be like, okay, well, we need resource involved. She's not making gains. You need to be doing basic assessments or screenings with her because there's something wrong. She's not meeting grade level. And why is that? Wait and see is the worst thing that they can say, because we see kids who are in grade 4 and suddenly can't read because they slid through. So waiting and seeing is, excuse me, very detrimental. So if you've been fortunate enough to have an assessment, and I realize that those are very difficult to obtain through the school system and are very expensive privately, what do you do next when you have that diagnosis? So you yourself as a parent should have a clear understanding of what is in the report, understand what their results are. You might not understand the scores, but definitely know what the diagnostic statement is. Understand the different terminology. And my favorite part of the report is the recommendation section at the end. Understand the school district policies and provincial policies, and know the roles and responsibilities of everybody involved. Sorry. I must have talked too much today. My apologies. So then you schedule a meeting. So you can meet with the classroom teacher or subject teacher, the resource teacher, the principal, and any other professional that's involved. And when you schedule that meeting, be very clear with what you want to discuss. So this is not the time at that 10-minute parent-teacher interview after report cards come out. That's not the time for this. You want to have a dedicated 45-minute hour meeting with them set aside, and let them know what you want to talk about, because no one likes to be surprised. Have copies of the assessment or the report, or send it ahead of time so they can prepare. Any previous report cards or other documentation. Have notes of what you want to discuss in the report. Notes help you stay on track. And then have a support person with you if you have someone available. So a spouse, a partner, a friend, a relative, if you have another advocate, someone who can keep you grounded and focused. It's hard when you're talking about your child and their learning, and I know things can get emotional, but if you're able to treat it like a business meeting and approach it with that way, and again with the sense that everyone should be circling the child, it will go off a lot better. People get defensive, and that's just human nature and the way things go, but it's not going to benefit the student or the child in the long run if people are not working together. I don't know, Amy, do you have any experience that you might want to share? You're on mute.
Sorry, I was just messaging Hope and I was getting a little wrapped up there. So scheduling meeting. Yeah, it's important to bring a support person, definitely. It's can be really challenging when you're in there, and it's you against the school, especially when the leadership sits in there and they're not on your side. You do have the right, if you are having if the school isn't agreeing with you anyways, you have the right to record a conversation as well when you're in there. I feel like I'm going down a dark road here, but these are rights that you do have. But bringing someone in there to be a witness and a support is fundamental, because I've been in those rooms as the parent, and I've had everybody gang up on me with my son sitting in the room, and it was horrifying. And you would think with the student sitting there who's 14 years old that they would back off, but they didn't. So
Hope's question is resources. So for a student with just a learning disability, air quote, they're not going to get an EA assigned. That's just not the case. So I don't know what resources you're looking for specifically. But there's low-tech assistive tech that they can give, highlighter, graph paper, seating in the classroom. It doesn't have to be high technology. So I'm not sure if you could elaborate, Hope, that would be really helpful.
Yeah. And I want to answer Catherine's question there, that there should be a meeting every year. Yes. When they're justified accommodations, there doesn't have to be a meeting if everything, like when you get a copy of it and it's kosher and it's kind of just flowing from year to year. So the past few years, I never had meetings directly. Well, obviously because of COVID, but I mean, prior to COVID, we didn't have to have as many sit down meetings, and they would send me the PLP and I would just mark it up as well and send it back to the resource teachers, and they would add comments. We were really lucky to have a couple rock star resource teachers the last few years. So
what about individualized?
Oh, you should be having a meeting on an individualized plan. My goal as a resource teacher was to have the parents in every 2 to 3 months.
We didn't have one this year. Every other year we have, but not this year.
You
No.
should be having at least one, if not 2 or 3 meetings
That's
for an
good to know.
individualized plan.
Yeah. And for a student with a PLP, like Amy mentioned, if the justified accommodations are working well, the plan won't look different from year to year. The plan will change if something changes with their ability and their learning. So from the LD side specifically. So if their accommodations, which we'll see here a few here in a second, if their accommodations are working, it's not going to change because they don't need to.
And I'm always hesitant, like I heard you earlier, Ainsley, say like maybe they don't need that accommodation anymore. Justified accommodations, I find when you have I have a learning disability. I feel like they ebb and they flow, and like one moment you might need it, or 1 month you might need it, and the next week you don't. And so when justified accommodations work, for the most part, especially if we're looking at this through a trauma-informed lens, when a child is triggered, or or a youth is triggered, those justified accommodations will need to go into effect immediately, and there shouldn't be oh, we have to get this back on or back off. I think it's easier just to keep it on there and let it ebb and flow, because when you're not triggered, I can speak too because I have PTSD as well. So when you're not triggered from that lens, you're in your flow, you're just going, you've got everything, your juices are going in. And then when you are triggered, things kind of shut down and it's much harder to cope. So one less thing to worry about would be trying to get those accommodations back on a PLP.
I think my brain must have been confused with adjustments. So if there's a curriculum outcome that has been adjusted and they've met that goal, the adjusted goal, then it can come off. So I had it backwards.
Yeah. And then, that's okay.
Thanks. So what do they look like? Because if your child's never been on one before, you don't know what to expect. So I actually have 3, grade 5, a 7, and a 12. They all have similar diagnoses. and I believe they're all at different school districts. I've received permission to share these from the parents, but all identifying information about the student has been removed. So unless I missed a name, but I don't think I did. So we'll take a look at that. So this is sample number 1 for this kiddo. They're in grade 5. So this is just what it looks like. It's a little dated, but that's fine. So nothing is really exciting on the top part, but do double check, because I've seen parents have said, well, the date is wrong for their grade because it was a clear copy and paste. So do check the finer details just to ensure that things are correct. And so you'll hear at the top, you'll see justification summary. So this student has a specific learning disorder with dyslexia and then dysgraphia. So they have difficulty with their writing. If there's no meds, it would be listed here. And then they talk about the present level function supported by assessments. So any assessments that the student might have had recently will be listed here. So this kiddo has had a psych ed assessment done by with a name and then a date, and then just a little summary. This summary is a little light. You'll see what I mean in a minute. There might be some attachments if there's any documentation. The student's strengths are listed here. These were really identifiable to the student, so I deleted them. And then their challenges. So decoding, which is his reading, his fine motor skills, which makes sense because he has dysgraphia, so he has difficulty with actually writing, and then therefore written output. And then their interests are listed here. So these should change, like this section, their interests and their strengths should change every year because if they're in grade 8, their interests of collecting Pokemon cards might not be the same as they were when they were in grade 3. So it should be up to date to reflect, their current information and interests.
And a really good rule of thumb there, this can kind of be identifying as to what kind of school, the culture of a school, but is to make sure their strengths are at least equal or outweigh their needs, right, on there, because as a teacher, it just, it's putting a positive outlook on the student and highlighting what they can do.
Yeah, instead of where they're weak.
Mm-hmm.
So current services involved. So this student has some sort of resource support. They're probably just monitoring that kiddo. And then they're on a PLP accommodated plan. So he just has justified accommodations. I've seen them here before where additional tutoring was actually checked off, like tutoring support. So I was like, yay, that's us. So here's the student's accommodations. So remember when I mentioned that they're broken down by presentation, response, and timing? This is his here. So questions are read aloud to the student. Oral testing, a scribe for tests, a scribe in general, spelling not counted in daily work or test situations. That's a really big one for kids with LDs, because they don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, did I spell this question right? Or like, did I spell this word right? So scribes are tricky because it's a human resource thing. And so it's important that it's there for tests, because then they can have access to a scribe for assessments. So that's an important one to have there. They might also have access to a reader or an interpreter. So someone who might interpret the questions for them. This student also has extended time, more than double. Accommodation should continue next year. So they actually put that right in the additional comments. They were receiving tutoring outside the school system through us using Barton. So that's how I know this student. So very light on the additional comments for this student, I might point out. So this is sample 2. It's not as clear, it's a little blurry, so my apologies there. They have dyslexia. They've been recently diagnosed with a learning disorder and threshold signs with written expression and math. They also have generalized anxiety and depression. So these kiddos have a lot going on. Sometimes it's not just sometimes a learning disability. There's a whole heap happening as well. So the student also had a psych ed with a diagnosis of their LD in reading. look at this student's strengths. They're kind, they're empathetic, they're compliant, so they'll do what they're asked. They have a supportive family, and they've got great listening skills. So, I mean, if you're to read that as a teacher, you're like, okay, sounds like a good kid. Their challenges: phonemic awareness, which is directly tied to their dyslexia, auditory memory, written output. They've got phonemic awareness there twice, so clearly editing. Reading fluency is difficult, and math facts. So they love playing video games, enjoy playing outside with a variety of sports, such as a basketball. Current services involved is they have assistive tech. They have their own personal laptop that is hooked up to the school network. So that is a possibility. If you provide the device, it can be hooked up to the school network. I believe this family had to fight for that to happen as well.
BYOD is what they call
Bring your own device. So here's this kiddos. They're just on a PLP accommodated. They don't have any resource support listed. And you'll see they have their questions read aloud, and then they're allowed to have an open book test, oral testing, spelling not counted. They're allowed a calculator. They have their laptop, speech to text, and text to speech, and then double time. And I forgot to mention this student is in grade 7, sorry. And then additional comments. There's a lot here, a lot listed for the student. So parents have provided a laptop. We've hooked it up to the network. And then some other accommodations for the student. So sitting near the teacher, that's a universal accommodation, but they put it in the plan. Repeating directions, chunking work into obtainable tasks, reading intervention with the resource teacher, multiple representation of concepts, additional explanation, encourage elaboration of their thoughts. So, and can you tell me more? And what do you think about that? So it's, do you engage the student a bit more? Provide proofreading strategies, fact sheets, so games to help build their fluency, and open communication with teachers and resource. So there's a lot more detail here.
And those are more universal too, right?
Yeah,
Like
they're
those are universal accommodations, and they've added them into the comments.
Yeah, which is great because it shows they've read the student's plan. They know what's in, or not their plan, sorry, their assessment. So they know what the student needs. So this person has someone has paid attention to this kiddo.
And they know them. I feel like they understand this child and have taken the time to get to know them. Yeah.
And so this is a grade 12 student. Oh, I went ahead one, sorry folks. And they have 2 learning disabilities and ADHD. So they're listed here. Again, we've got a list of some different assessments that they've had. So they had informal observation, there was a consult, and a psych ed. And again, the summaries here are a lot longer. So it's clear that they've paid more attention to things here, and it's really tailored to the student. So student experience barriers to learning due to feeling overwhelmed and getting behind on assignments. So maturity wise, this grade 12 student was able to express, I get overwhelmed when I'm behind, and then I get behind. So that's the difference. And then that's why I really encourage kids, even in grade 3 and grade 4, to start advocating for themselves, because then this is what they're, could be on their PLP in grade 12. What this student needs through, scaffolding, modeling, chunking work, it's all listed here. Universal accommodations are recommended. And then there's a bit more onto their learning disability and some specifics from that psych ed report. So their strengths, so gross motor skills, supportive family, expressive language, challenges, inattentive, written output, and organization, which the organization goes hand in hand with the ADHD and executive functioning. And then their interests, so sports, spending time with friends, working on their vehicle, and working with their hands. Who's involved? Guidance, resource, and they have direct resource support, and he's on a PLP accommodated.
I'll say that a direct resource support isn't always common in high school for a justified accommodations, but if you advocate hard enough and loud enough, so and you've got the right resource teachers who also believe in that support, that it can happen.
That's why you ask. My motto for a lot of things in my work is it doesn't hurt to ask. And so for this student, it breaks down into the 4 areas. So presentation, response, assistive tech, and timing. Extended double time should be on every kid's PLP. It's harder to provide that for in-class tasks or assignments because we don't want to penalize them by, well, I have no extra time, you need to come in at recess or lunch to do that. That's not fair to the kid. And that's just bound by the length of the school day, right? Like we can't extend the school day to give them extra time to work on the assignment, but that might mean that the teacher shortens the assignment so they can get a portion of it done. Or maybe it gets sent home so that they can finish, but only if they understand what the next step is that they have to do. So that, when that is the situation where they're not finishing things at school, you really need to talk to your classroom teacher about things. And then look at the additional comments for the students' PLP. So they're more receptive to writing and getting extra support in another space. So something changed in that student where they were more willing to take that on and receive that support. Formatting the test to multiple choice, fill in the blanks. So different response options for that student to limit their writing. They're still going to demonstrate their knowledge and that they've learned the content in the curriculum. It's just their response is different. And praise and encouragement, relationships are important. So they know this student, and you can tell that just based on the comments. He doesn't want his iPad anymore, right? So that is reflected. So some teacher isn't going, hey, Amy, you need to use your iPad. It says you have to use your iPad, when they've expressed that they don't want to use it anymore. So what did we notice with the PLPs? Or are there any questions about what we saw? We can talk about them further. Very detailed. Yeah, that last one definitely was, Jenny. Yeah. And so, I mean, that might go down to the school really listening and understanding. It could be that there's a strong parent advocate working with that grade 12 student. There's lots of reasons that it could be that detailed, but there's no reason why they shouldn't be that detailed either. Mm-hmm. So just as we mentioned before, PLPs should be looked at whenever there's a transition. So between grades, if teachers shift when they go to a new school at the beginning and at the end of the school year. PLPs should be out by mid-October, right, Amy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, usually like October 15th, 18th-ish is the deadline for them to be completed. The justified ones, I got my behavior momentum. I do them first usually because they were the faster ones to get done. Yeah.
So if you feel, if your child has been one on before and you hit the fall and you haven't, early November and you have not seen their PLP, ask for it.
I'd say even by like October 25th, it should never be later than that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they ask for like a week extension, but typically it's around the 15th, 18th-ish, whatever that Friday is falling on.
So you should see it every year. And the content might not change, but you should see it every year. If there's been a change in their learning or development, it should be looked at or changed. And maybe you feel something isn't going right. It should be looked at and communicate with the school and document everything. I didn't include the slide, it was a video. Understood.org is an excellent resource on learning disabilities and ADHD and attention issues. They used to have, and I hope they do have, a video that shows you how to set up a PLP binder so that you can keep all of your child's paperwork together, their report cards, any assessments, any doctor's notes, anything like that. Samples of their most recent work should all kind of be in that binder. It's American, so education policy is not going to match, but I can make sure that I share that link later. Oh, I keep going the backwards, people, I'm sorry. So some important policies. So as I mentioned, 322, accommodations for assessment or instruction and assessment. This one here, provincial assessment program, that was just updated in February. There were some changes made. I only saw the date had changed. I don't know exactly what in the protocols have changed. I didn't get the chance to compare. I only knew that things changed because I was looking it up for another parent and I was like, oh, they updated it. And I think a lot of that goes around with COVID and doing the assessments online. Some of them are done online now, so that's why it's changed. School district policies, they're all listed on their websites. Some schools have better summaries of provincial policies than others. I know Anglophone West has their policies rewritten, but the other ones are a little slim. But it's good to know what's happening in your district because we're one province, but sometimes policies are read differently, interpreted differently in different districts. I wish it was more consistent. I'll come back to this, but I'll make sure Catherine has a PDF copy of this PowerPoint. You're more than allowed to share that with the people who attended tonight so that they can have these resources. At the end, you'll find just some very brief information on 3 specific learning disabilities, the most common ones, and just some resources, teaching strategies, and links to other support or information. I think this was coming from a parent presentation I did. They wanted some strategies for at-home work. So that's at the back of the presentation. Just for you to use. Yeah, that's the end. Questions. Oh, that's a long comment. Is it common for resource teachers to not have the skills and understanding to do this? In my experience with my son, it was only in high school that the resource teacher that was able to create a strong PLP. Unfortunately, that happens. I saw an email from a resource teacher from a district who was seeking clarification if dyslexia was a learning disability. So the qualification to be a resource teacher is a master's. Correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, correct?
Mm-hmm. You should have a master's, but there's a lack
Not
of
always the case.
No. So there was a little blip there where they thought they could send people to like a 3-day training and put them into a resource that would make up for a master's. So that's not happening anymore. A lot of I know of one of my friends who just received her B and she has a lot of experience in working in resource, but she's not finished her master's yet. So a lot are working towards finishing or do have. Now, and then there's the old school teachers too, right? That their practices haven't been, they're not up to snuff with the current policies. So you can run into that as well. And there can be just cultural, like the school culture, like someone can have the best of intentions. And when you get into a culture that like the leadership doesn't really understand PLPs or exceptionalities and what these children need, and maybe the priorities are somewhere else. I see like sometimes like sports is prioritized a lot by a leadership, and so our children with exceptionalities aren't always understood, I guess I'll say. I'll be diplomatic there, as well as they should be. And the attention isn't put there to details.
Yeah. Um,
I'm reading Naomi's there.
Okay.
Naomi, I feel like you need an advocate to go with you to this meeting to support you. From what I'm reading, I would say your son probably does need a PLP and very specific goals to help support fill in those gaps for him.
My email's there, Naomi, if you want to reach out to me. I'm not in the office tomorrow, anybody, so but I'm back on Tuesday. So Naomi, please contact me, and we'll set up a time to talk on the phone or through a voice. We can do a Zoom call too if you're comfortable with that. And yeah, how can a young adult get an assessment for learning disability if they feel they have one and it might not have been noticed because of another diagnosis? Is the adult, Catherine, in post-secondary, or are they struggling
No.
to keep or maintain employment?
They're just finishing their adult high school education diploma.
So
18.
they would probably qualify for one with through Working NB. Are they located in the St. John region? I'm just
Yeah.
trying to think of. So St. John Options Outreach is a partner of ours. I work with the staff there. And so if they're looking to expand their education beyond the adult diploma, so they're thinking, I want to go to college or post-secondary university, or if they feel that they might have difficulty gaining employment, they'll take the young adult through a screening process, and they might qualify for the
Okay.
assessment provided by post-secondary.
Oh, that's good to know, because when I was diagnosed with learning disability, it was in post-secondary and my parents had to pay for it out of pocket.
LDNB manages that contract. So we receive the referrals, and then we assign to a psychologist. It's an in-out thing. We don't have direct client relation with them. So I don't know, I can't guarantee that they will receive it. They need to go through the screening process with the employment agency. It's worth a shot. So Options Outreach in St. John.
Okay, thank you.
A Working NB office in any of the regions would also work. And we work really closely with CCRW in Moncton as well.
Oh, that's great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. And that's it.
Are there any other questions? Give it a couple seconds to see if anyone has any other questions.
I'm just going to pop Ainsley's email in there one more time because she's
Perfect.
Thanks.
And thank you. It's also up on the screen for folks too.
There you go. Yeah.
And then Taylor is our tutor coordinator, and her contact information is there if you'd like to know more about our BART tutoring program. You can contact her directly. She's on vacation for the next 5 days. The poor girl deserves a break. She's been very busy, so I'll be monitoring her email. So if you happen to email next week, you'll get a response from me. So, but she can direct things to you.
And a really cool thing about our tutoring program is not just for children or youth. It can be for anyone at any age.
Yeah,
so
that's fantastic. It's great.
Our current clients are youth, but I've worked with several adults. So
I guess we do not have any other questions. I want to thank Ainsley and Amy for coming this evening and sharing so much good information. I think we'll all be thinking about it, and I hope that anyone who has questions reaches out to Ainsley, because I learned a lot tonight, but there's going to be questions because it's a lot of stuff to process, but it's a lot of really good, important stuff. So reach out to Ainsley. If you somehow lose her contact information, you can ask me or one of the other coordinators at the network, and we will make sure you get connected. I want to also tell everybody what's coming up with us next week. So next week we have our regional meetings. But if you can't make the night that your regional meeting is on, feel free to join another one. Tuesday, Patricia and I will be hosting the South group, and then Wednesday evening, then we're having the North group, and then Thursday is the Central and Miramichi group. So those groups are open to anybody who is thinking of in the process of adopting or fostering, or current and adoptive foster parents. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And again, thank you, Ainsley and Amy, and thank you everyone for coming out and joining us. Have a great evening, everyone.